Points to remember in the construction of rubrics by Aubrey Joy Miravalles, 3 English. Objectives. By the end of the lesson, the students will be able to establish criteria parallel to the expected outcome, set the standards for extreme levels and those in between, use clear and specific descriptions for each grid, create a rubric that is valid or appropriate for the performance and/or output that he is tasked to evaluate. Good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon.
Did you fully understand our past lesson? What was it all about?
It was all about the holistic and analytic type of rubrics, ma'am.
Wonderful. Now, we can all move on to our next lesson. I will show you 2 outputs from a poster making contest. You have to rate both drawings from 1 to 5, with 1 as the lowest score and 5 as the highest score. Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, look at your score sheet. Who got the higher rating? Simply press the winning piece. How did you select the better piece of art between the 2? Did you base it simply on your preference? What were your standards? Did you have any?
I chose the one with the color pink in it. I chose the cute one.
Do you think that you have been fair in judging? Be honest.
Not really, ma'am.
So how do you think you can be a fair judge? Click your answer on the board. But before we tackle the rating scale, first we must know the points to remember in construction of rubrics. The first one is to revisit the objectives and determine criteria for the expected outcome. You have to consider what kind of performance or output are you going to judge or rate. For it to be parallel to the scores and standards that you will set beforehand, have you ever wondered why the invitations for judges always include the nature of the contest itself? This is the reason why.
The weatherman says that it will snow tomorrow.
Let's say, for example, that this reporter is successful. By the end of her report, each one of us knows what these icons mean. Then that should say that she or he deserves a high rating because he has achieved his goal. And that is determining the quantitative and qualitative level of performance. Now, let's move on to determining the quantitative and qualitative level of performance. Remember that in assigning the quantitative level, be sure to use only 4 levels to ensure that there is a forced choice, no neutral grounds to be chosen. That is essential in judging fairly. Since we have thoroughly discussed the subject of when to use holistic or analytic type of rubrics, I believe this is kind of self-explanatory for you. So I'm no longer going to explain it because we have already agreed that rubrics is not like a stocking. It's not one size fits all. Each rubric has to be modified and molded for it to match whatever type of output or performance you're going to rate. Determine the standards or qualities for extreme levels, the highest and the lowest, and of course everything in between. You may consider putting opposite standards. Just like in earlier example, the highest standard was extremely satisfactory and the lowest was extremely unsatisfactory. After that, you have to determine those in between. The grid next to the highest grid may contain standard nearer to it, like satisfactory. It's nearer to very or extremely satisfactory, right? While the grid closest to the lowest grid may contain a slightly better than it. In other words, it's just better than getting a 0. So, the quality of the standards in all the grids move to a decreasing value as one moves from the highest to the lowest. Of course, that's obviously the way to go. Do you understand? And of course, the last point to remember in the construction of rubrics is to use specific descriptions which are precise and unambiguous. You have to make sure that you have a forced choice in this part. Like, if this criteria is not achieved, then you cross it out. There's no neutral ground, as we said earlier, because this is important for us to be fair in judging. The rating scale is another tool which can be used to evaluate the projects of students. It can be used also for other purposes, like assessing the contributions of individual students in their group works, and etc. Below is a sample rating scale to evaluate multimedia presentation for a specific content, which is soil erosion. This is presented as an alternative to the rubric. As you can see, the ratings to the sample rubric is as follows. 1 is for poor, 2 is for fair, 3 is for good, 4 is for very good, and 5 is for excellent. And also we have here the criteria for the content of the presentation, 60%. For the accuracy, 10%, and for the design and layout, 20%. Teamwork and cooperation is 10%. Well, as I've said earlier about the specific descriptions, you can see there that, for example, in content number 1, how do you determine that the content is really good? Number 1, it says that it should contain pictures showing images caused by the erosion. And then number 2, provides evidences on how weather elements cause erosion. Shows evidences on how man and animals cause erosion. Provides pupils opportunities to infer on the effects of erosion on land, plants, animals, and men. So as you can see, these are specified criteria for the content, which is 60% of their rating. So if you understand this, then maybe we can apply the skills. Right on!
Yes, ma. Yes, ba.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now let's put your brain to work. Reflections for the day is for you to construct a holistic or analytic rubric to evaluate any one of the following: multimedia presentation, web quest, flyer, brochures, newsletter. Hand in your work when you're done. Okay, let's call it a day. Goodbye, class. See you!
See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.